Okay, I think we're recording. So, welcome, Ashley Colby. Thank you again so much for agreeing to talk with me this morning. What time is it there now?
Yeah, it's 11 a.m., so it's still morning
It's
here.
11 a.m. Still morning. Okay, cool. In Uruguay, and I am here in Fort Collins, Colorado. And this is a conversation I'm recording so that I can share it with my students, and we can get some conversation in the class, some discussion in the class going on about regenerative agriculture as a potential solution, the communities that might be connected to that, what those might look like, and also just this whole concept of doomer optimism. So, for the benefit of my class, I want to kind of just introduce how I found out about you, and it's I was following different people on Twitter, and I've been following this whole doomer versus optimist versus denialist, all these ists out there, and stumbled upon and also my own interests are I'm not a farmer or anything, but I'm fascinated by the concept of regenerative agriculture, and it's potential, for building communities that have sustainability compared to the world we're living in right now. And so, anyway, I somehow came across Rizoma Field School, and I really liked what you were doing out there, and the connections you were making to things, and the message you were sending out. So I started following you, and I don't actually know how anything progressed beyond that, but I started thinking, wow, I'm teaching this class called The End of the World. And I thought, based on the kinds of stuff you were sharing and other people, your mutuals and other people like that, I just realized, wow, this is an area that needs to be included. Um, so again, thank you for your willingness to join
Sure.
us
Yes,
for
happy to be
this
here.
conversation. And I wonder if you could just give us a quick little intro into your own whatever you would like to share about your personal and professional background, and then we'll dig into those details later. But just kind of like a little surface exposure in the beginning.
Yep. Yep. So I am from Chicago. Spent a lot of time traveling after college and before grad school. Then I started grad school. I went to Washington State University, got my PhD in environmental sociology. And in the middle of that process, kind of as a part of the process of learning what I was learning about environmental sociology and the state of the world and sociology, the sociological um, I guess, critique of the society that we're talking about, which was United States, primarily is what a lot of people studied in my department. I just sort of realized, like, wow, what's the plan
Mm-hmm.
here? There's just too many crazy things going on in the world to kind of stick with the status quo. So I studied people who self-produced food in Chicago, a significant number of amount of self-production. So I called them subsistence food producers because they produced at least 50% of their own food. And then this just sort of started me down this path toward what I say, I don't even know if I have an umbrella term, but people who are exploring successful alternatives to the mainstream system that seems to be failing. And so as part of that process, my husband and I, with the idea that, maybe trying to make a go of it in the United States is going to be difficult in this era, especially raising kids. We decided in the middle of of my PhD program to move to Uruguay. And
Mm-hmm.
as a part of my whole thinking about teaching about alternatives that exist, we started a field school where we host American students on study abroad trips, where we bring them to work with small scale agroecological producers here and people who do alternative things like bioconstruction, cooperative farmers markets and artisan markets and that kind of thing. And yeah, so that's my basic background now. The field school was on hiatus for the pandemic, so I've been exploring other ways to make a vocation out of my, the things that I'm most passionate about. So I've just recently started this new online class
Mm.
called the
Saw a bit
Homestead
about that.
Incubator.
Mm.
Yeah, so just basically different ways to get at pairing those who are actively exploring alternatives with those who want to learn more, and who feel stuck in the dominant paradigm. So I feel like that's more or less my vocation, and basically what I do for a living, and my and it ties all up with my own personal life, because I'm that person who's sort of between the two worlds personally.
Sure. So you aren't taking interns right now, or is that
We are not.
reopening, or?
Yeah, we are reopening. We have our first student group coming from Ohio
Mm,
State University in May,
cool. Wow.
post-pandemic. So that'll be great to get back going again.
Yeah.
We do work with an organization here, that's based in Argentina, to host virtual interns. We don't have one right now,
Hmm.
so we could potentially take on a virtual intern, just on like an ad hoc basis. Work
Hmm.
with students, to get credit at their universities, and
Hmm.
do that kind of thing. So we've done a little bit of that in the past.
Hmm.
But yeah, we're waiting to get back going with the
Yeah.
student groups.
Oh, that's exciting. Cool. Yeah. So I wanted to introduce you to just a little bit of what we cover in the class. I did share the syllabus with you, so I don't want to, go reinvent the wheel here. But we look at the archaeological record, both critically and also in terms of, just what it potentially could teach us about collapse of civilizations through time. We look at the contemporary situation based on cultural anthropological research into different communities around the world, including the Andes and communities in Tanzania, and also in Europe and Alaska and other places, to get a feel for what's actually happening out there and how it's being portrayed and understood, which is also a really interesting dimension, how communities understand what's going on, how they make meaning out of it,
Yeah.
and that can be pretty diverse. And then we also explore the anthropological imagination, which kind of I'm kind of riffing on C. Wright Mills' idea of the sociological imagination, when we think, well, what would be a cross-cultural version of that, and how could that be incorporated into creative expression as well? So we do that, and we cover a bunch of concepts. This idea of, well, what do we mean by collapse? What's the definition of collapse, and to what extent is transformation a better word in many cases?
Mm-hmm.
And what are the causes, of these collapses or transformations? And obviously it's always multi-factor. It's never one thing. So we kind of explore those sorts of ideas, and then we look at the idea of adaptation. How does that show up? What does that look like? And of course, nowadays, in the whatever it is, the debate around climate change, we have this notion of adaptation coming up, and we read Jem Bendel's paper, Deep Adaptation,
Mm-hmm.
because he's kind of laying it out there in a way that you can't see it being laid out, or at least until recently, it's not been laid out in the same way. And we see a little bit of the pushback that some people, groups, have against the concept of adaptation. Like, I don't know, this is my own editorial comment, but it just seems like optimism, especially maybe the American version, or the United States version of optimism, kind of steps in here to color things a little bit, or to marginalize other perspectives a little bit. And so I'd be curious about your take on that. We also explore the concept of vulnerability in anthropology, looking at how it's defined, and what makes one community more vulnerable than another. And there's a lot of different aspects to that, socioeconomics being one of them. And then the concept of assemblage. Where do we get our knowledge from, and how do we construct our understanding of the world based on those sources? And what kind of tools do we have available to us when we, in our assemblage? And we see that, we see that knowledge is really, that assemblage is in an interesting state right now, because it's, some of it comes from your local community, in terms of it, the relationship you've had traditionally to the natural environment, and social environments and so forth. But a lot of it now seems to be coming from social media, and so it's really changed, I think, how people are our understanding the world in some pretty scary ways.
Mhm.
So we look at that, and we look at also, as I said, the anthropological imagination. And so I'm actually having my students, and I taught this class once before, do their own creative work. So they produce something at the end, a little exhibition of really interesting work. It could be short stories, it could be paintings, it could be songwriting, it can be sculpture, any number of things. And wow, it's blown me away what the students can produce. And it's also, for me, spotlighted how much in higher education, in our disciplinary approaches, we marginalize those aspects of being human.
Totally.
And so students come across as being just heads on sticks, and they are assessed based on their intellectual accomplishments or whatever. But that whole dimension of being human, so much of it is marginalized.
Totally. Yeah.
Yeah, and that seems super important in light of the changes that are happening in our world today. Super
Mhm.
important to reintegrate
Mhm.
into the, and where is the place in higher education for that? I'd like to. That's a rhetorical question, but we want to keep working on that one too. Anyway, so that's just a little introduction of what we cover, and I guess for the sake of conversation, anything that came up for you that you'd like to share based on what I just said, I welcome.
Yeah, thank you. I guess we could pick up the Jem Bendel piece because it's a
Mm.
pretty good intro to like that this I'm trained as an environmental sociologist, so I'm pretty there's so many different little discourses out there, but that one I know a lot about because it's like,
Mm.
my training. So in the midst of doing my PhD research with people who do subsistence food production in Chicago, in and around Chicago, I talk to rural people too. I started following this deep adaptation Facebook
Mm.
group. So I'm sure did you already read Jem Bendel's
Yes.
piece in your class?
Yes.
Okay, so your students are aware of like what the point of the piece is. I personally think it's incredibly important and impactful to come to some terms with the state of the world. This is the doomer part for me. I think that Jem Bendel has done amazing work to more or less create space for people to like come
Mm.
to allow some recognition that not everything is going to be as it once was. We have some challenges to face. I think your critique about it, the American like can-do spirit or optimism as like a resistance to his piece is really spot on. I think there's a lot of like stick your head in the sand, like we still have time, or we can solve this with technology
Mm-hmm.
or whatever. We don't actually, I think the two camps are basically, things can't go on as they are, nor should they, kind of thing. And that's the Jem Bendel camp. And then the other one is like, it's almost like the stages of grief, bargaining. Like we
Mm-hmm.
can keep going how we are. And I think my sense with the stages of grief is that Jem Bendel's more in it moving toward the acceptance stage of grief. However, my critique then comes in when I was in these Facebook groups with the deep adaptation group people, the people who have read the piece and are basically coming to terms with the state of the environment and society and lots of different things. What I found was, in my opinion, a painful forum for people to sort of talk about their negative emotions that surround this thing. Okay, that's fine. It's good to have a place to do that. But over time, over the course of months while I was following this group, there was like some red flags to me in terms of a lot of people posting like, I don't know how to move on. I don't know the purpose of life. Like I feel completely stuck. Of course I would never have children. How could I bring children into this absolute horrible world that no one could ever survive or thrive in? And reading these comments like over the course of months made me realize like, the doomer stage is a period of time, that one must go through, but then you have to emerge on the other side with something. And so to me, doomer optimism is almost like a direct comment on that piece, because and that whole subset, the doomer subset, who more or less, like, I don't begrudge them their like emotions, and I had the same emotions, but I do think at a certain point it is pathological to like be stuck in the same negative emotions, depression, anxiety. It is healthier to find a way to move forward positively. I know that's difficult, but so my whole advocacy is, there's a beautiful world out there. There's lots of people working on solutions. It's not all Pollyanna, but
Looks like we might have had a glitch in the
I'm
bandwidth here. Oop. Okay, yeah, we
oh,
just got a little delay, a little glitch there.
okay.
It's okay.
And tell me if it slows down, and
Sure.
I'll repeat, but
Okay.
sometimes it happens with my internet. But
Sure.
yeah, but basically what gets you out of bed in the morning? What is it that makes you want to live, basically? And so my project is more or less trying to give people the breadth of options that are out there, that I see that are extremely hopeful, to give them an idea of like, how they might come out of the doomerism.
Yeah, so yours is, yeah, that's very interesting, because it seems to me that I agree with you that um, we're having trouble right now defining what hope means. We've discussed this in my class too, and is it just this kind of blind optimism, or does hope have an active component? And do you is it a verb rather than a noun or an adjective? And and that action kind of creates hope. And I think Greta Thunberg said this, but also I think it was it's just been in the I'm trying to remember the name of the it just escaped me. It'll come back to me. But anyway, the famous desert anarchist.
Oh my God, Ed Abbey.
Yeah, Ed Abbey. Yes, exactly. He's
Yeah.
the one who talked about action being an antidote to despair. And so it seems like that's what I'm hearing from you too. Is just where do you can wallow in this sense of impending doom and then feel like there's nothing you can do about it, or you can get together with others and try to do something, regardless of whether it saves the world or whatever. It's something as human beings that we have a long history of doing. So maybe we could kind of drill down into that a little bit. What are you doing
Yeah,
specifically out
yeah.
there in Uruguay, and maybe even why Uruguay too? If we could kind of learn a little bit more about that.
Sure. So Uruguay, I'm a little bit, I I hesitate to say this because I don't want anyone to feel like gloomy about being in the United States, but I had studied enough about sociology and historical collapses to think, I'm not gonna, I don't really want to take the risk to live within the borders of the empire
Mm,
during its decline. That doesn't mean that you can't make a good living and
hmm
have a wonderful existence there. So I'll just put that out there.
hmm
Uruguay, we're looking for some place, basically where we're from in the south side of Chicago is just an urban neighborhood, and it's just not a place where we could envision, or I mean, it's not even actually possible to make the kind of life we wanted to live, like small scale production, a community of people who value that, maybe a budding craft culture, a sharing culture, solidarity culture. And so we're figuring, okay, so we're not going to live where we're from. So we're going to have to be like implants somewhere. We're going to, be migrants, whether it's within the
hmm
US or outside. So why not pick a place that like has a robust culture where we wouldn't have to be like reinventing the wheel of the life we want to live, but instead there's like an already existing culture and community that we can learn from. I think a lot of times in my life, I in the United States, I kept thinking like, wouldn't it be great if we had like a robust culture of like childcare cooperatives, for example? But then you're swimming against the current of all the other people who you have to convince them, like, how does a cooperative work? What are the rules? Like, whereas here in Uruguay, it's just pretty common that people will drop their kids off with you and you drop your kids off with them. And there's an understanding about how that mutualism works. In the US, I would basically have to like try to get people to do that with me. That's just one example where it's nice to just be in a place where I'm learning from their already existing methods for mutual sharing and community, as opposed to trying to reinvent the wheel and swimming against the current. So there's a lot of things about Uruguay like that. People who are used to low resource use know how to share. Basically, when things are expensive, people have a culture of sharing, of solidarity, of mutual aid. Like small scale production is super common. So people all know what they're doing. Everybody kind of does it themselves. So there's a huge culture of like skills. Everybody's got just so many skills, hands-on skills, and just know-how, knowledge, connection to the land, and not in this like woo-woo way where they're like really self-conscious about it. It's just like part of life. And to me, I think, yeah, there's something to be said about that too, where part of my research findings with people in the US who do self-production, the most robust communities are the ones that were not so self-conscious about what they were doing. They're not saying like, we're creating community, we're changing the world. They're just trying to produce food and making friends with other people who do. And to me, that can allow for a really robust community. I think once a lot of things, we can get into this more deeply, but I think once communities get too self-conscious about making community, then the culture can be kind of stifling. Like there's an expectation on what the culture is and what we're doing here, and it's like self-important and all this stuff. So to me, I really like the practical connections that people make, and the just sort of like we all have goals, we all have things that we're doing, let's help each other out. It's a really robust system. So of the things that I think are the most important to turn towards, that I personally think, now I will just caveat this by saying I'm generally a pluralist, and I'm generally try my best to be agnostic toward other constellations of solutions that other people are exploring. For example, there's a whole constellation of people who are into like cryptocurrencies and Web3 and solar punk. Go for it, please. I wish you all the success in the world. It's not my bag. But good, it's fine. And in general, I try to be like super supportive and agnostic about like being judgmental, like that solution is never going to work for what. Having said that, I'm pretty strongly against high tech, high material input, high energy systems as a solution. And that is where I kind of draw the line. There's like a shift in the techno utopians where, people just think everybody should live in cities, everything should be imported, we should completely rewild. That I draw a line on. I don't think that's the right path. Okay, so among the things that I'm interested in supporting, and things that I think in general, I never said this out loud before, but I think part of the reason I like this set of solutions is because it's the lowest risk, and I am like extremely risk averse person. I don't think we should be taking wild, crazy, unknown risks. We should go with the known. So for me, small scale craft production of things, small scale communities, human size solutions are the least risky because they are the most successful historically, like in all of human history. So to me, I like this constellation because I think you can't really go wrong with like having a well and access to your own energy and self-producing food. It's the most likely scenario where the least amount of people's lives and livelihoods are risked risked out of some idea of like, this solution will work. Like, for me, I think the more people who get skills in terms of small scale production, not just food, but small scale craft culture and livelihoods, and then the more people that learn those skills in community with other people who are learning those skills or know those skills already, because there's a lot of people who know these skills who are like thrilled to share them. That's a really robust and low risk set of solutions, in my opinion. And so that's the place where I kind of try to hold up those people doing that stuff, because I think like, yeah, it just seems to me like there's a really, it's a pretty clear path for a lot of people to just get some hands-on skills. And then part of my dissertation research just showed the multiple ways in which that kind of activity is robust and beneficial. So it not only helps people like feel self-sufficient, it also makes them feel connected to the land, the resource base, nature, grateful for nature, understand how to manage things themselves. Like, for example, like, where did this wood for this wooden spoon come from? Is it from my own forest? Now I know about forest management because I'm thinking about these things. But on top of it, and this is like the part that I don't think most people know about, there is robust community that comes out of that whole reconnecting project. And so there's just multiple benefits, and so I tend to steer people in that direction, but like
Makes
I said,
sense.
I'm open to other solutions too.
Yeah, there's a lot in what you're saying here. So one of the things I've noticed, and this is just, I haven't done any research on this, this is just what I've observed on social media, on Twitter, but it seems like it's very interesting what you're talking about with pluralism. When I look at what you're doing, it seems very inclusive. And, and I guess I have two questions related to this, so I'll start with the first one. What I've noticed that other people are doing, maybe specifically here in the US, which I think would be interesting if that was the case, is that it seems like it's not a self-conscious, it doesn't fall into the category of the self-conscious community building. It maybe falls into the category of a self-righteous community building, where they seem to have certain people are allowed in, and other people, if they don't share their religious beliefs or their ideas about, the superiority of a particular kind of approach to living life, then they're demeaned, as we see all the time in social media. So do you see that as an American thing, or because the article you shared, sorry, not your article, but the one you shared about in Yes magazine about a very, very inclusive approach to changing ways of doing agriculture in the U.S. in response to climate change, flies in the face of my observations on social media. So I guess I'd like your take on that, first of all.
Yeah, in general, I think people are tribal. Like, people are tribal. It is what it is. Like, and I think probably those who can overcome tribal signaling are the exception, not the rule in general around the world. And one thing I have to say I love about Uruguay is how inclusive everybody is. I've learned so much from their just open curiosity. There's just the country of Uruguay accepted several of the released detainees from Guantanamo, and helped them get set up with small businesses here.
Wow.
Just like this whole culture of like, come on in, but also don't lose your heritage. Like, tell us about your heritage. Where are you from? Oh, that's so curious. Like, yeah. So I think that's
very interesting to me. Yeah.
It's beautiful. It's lovely. I just think like probably not the case in most places in the world. It takes like a certain kind of like cosmopolitanism. I would also just suggest that a lot of people who have moved around, and a lot of Uruguayans, it's very common to go to Spain or the US for like a period of time to work. People who have like been migrants in other cultures, I think, tend to be more less judgmental and more accepting. Having said that, yeah, I don't know if it's a US thing, but I'm just extremely opposed to that. Basically, what I found in my dissertation research is a lot of the people who were subsistence food producers were talking, it was like old timers, let's say like an old timer hunter and fisherman talking to a newcomer, and you would not believe the diversity. I mean, these people would never speak to each other otherwise. And so part of my project is to find ways in which people have overlapping interests and get them together, and the interest can be the driver of the relationship, and that allows for pluralism. So this Yes magazine, we've got conventional farmers who realize conventional farming is not long for this world and want to do something different, mixing together with people who are like doing it explicitly for environmental reasons, mixing together with NGOs and all these people who have a shared interest, but that shared interest has brought them to this specific practical activity, which they then work their relationship around co-learning this activity, which is regenerative ranching or regenerative farming in general. And so for me, I really try to highlight like the practical and what we could do in tandem with people who are different from us as a way to enact pluralism. Because yeah, I do think there's just subsets of people who, in my opinion, there's a whole bunch of people, and like left and right doesn't even make sense anymore, but like across the sociological spectrum, who find ways to exclude others. Like they're not blank enough to be my ally. And then blank enough just keeps getting smaller and smaller. And it's like, oh, well, they talked to somebody who's not blank enough for me, so now that they're done. And it's like, you are not gonna have a strong and robust community with this attitude. I'm sorry, you're just not. And to me, it's like a matter of strategy too, and resilience is to understand how to make connections with others despite ideological differences.
That's such an important vision in the world we're living in today, which is of course so ridiculously polarized. So finding those points of and I love what you said there about finding the intersection of interests in some work that I've done in the past with international, not personally, but with the people who do international conflict management. That seems to be the place you want to go, not values, not beliefs, but right there into interests. And then people can find that space where they can cooperate with each other and build something together. So that just makes a heck of a lot of sense to me. I'm kind of curious. I guess this might be getting us literally into the weeds, but in terms of regenerative agriculture, the practice of it, your perspective on this. In another class, which is sort of running parallel with this one, I had a student who brought up that they noticed, we were reading a book. You might be familiar with Braiding Sweetgrass by Robin Wall Kimmerer. And we were reading that book in the class, and the student brought up how he had noticed his family are ranchers, and he had noticed how the soil and the plants were growing better where the cattle had been versus places where they had not been, where they're just mowing things and throwing chemicals down and all this kind of stuff. And I know that's a theme that runs through regenerative agriculture, the importance of livestock done right. And there's so much rhetoric nowadays about get rid of all livestock and rewilding, you mentioned, which I have some sympathy for, but I also I what you said really resonates with me in terms of where's the human community part of it then. Humans have been around for as an anthropologist I can say for a very long time, and we seem to have been part of things for a good piece of that, and now we seem to think we're separate from it. And so, I'd like your thoughts on, livestock and their relationship to the natural environment and human communities and that sort of thing. Whatever you'd like to share about that.
Yeah. So basically, I think the largest scale comment on that point is that humans can be a positive animal in an ecosystem. And I think like just saying that out loud for some reason has become like taboo, but humans, there are examples of humans in ecosystems that have had not only long-standing positive relationships within the ecosystem with the rest of the non-human world, but regenerative, or they're a keystone species. For example, in the Great Plains, there's examples of tribal communities doing planned burns, planting fruit and nut trees on the outer parts of their settlements, so that doing planned burns to keep the ecosystem in a sort of grassland so that the bison populations would stay up. So it was like sort of like a managed hunter-gatherer. But again, they're not just hunting in the wild, they're hunting in a ecosystem that they set up. Pat, would you hand me that Tao Ryan book, Beyond the War on Invasive Species? I'm going to read a quote from this book on this topic, because I just read this and it's amazing. Hopefully I can find it. Yes, okay, page 149. So I'm going to read from this book, which is called Beyond the War on Invasive Species by Tao Ryan. And she here is quoting, I'm saying Tao, it's Dao, excuse me, I'm pronouncing it wrong. She is quoting somebody who works at the National Natural Resource Conservation Service called Kat Anderson, and this is like, it'll take a minute to read, but I think it's worth it. Contemporary Indians often use the word wilderness as a negative label for land that has not been taken care of by humans for a long time. For example, where dense understory shrubbery or thickets of young trees block visibility and movement. A common sentiment among California Indians is that a hands-off approach to nature has promoted feral landscapes that are inhospitable to life. Quote, "The white man sure ruined this country," said James Russ, a Southern Sierra Miwok elder. "It's turned back to wilderness." California Indians believe that when humans are gone from an area long enough, they lose the practical knowledge about correct interactions, and the plants and animals retreat spiritually from the earth or hide from humans. When intimate interaction ceases, the continuity of knowledge passed down through generations is broken and land becomes, quote, wilderness. So to me, like, that just gives me chills, because it's really at the intersection of what we need to do here, which is there is no set prescription about how humans should interact with land. I'm just arguing, and I think it's worth saying out loud, that humans ought to interact with their landscapes in a way that is respectful of them, builds up ecosystems, and the way that looks will be dependent on the ecosystem, the climate, the rainfall, the soil type, the culture, like what people's diets consist of, et cetera, et cetera. But just to like the most basic part of this debate, for example, are animals in agriculture good or bad, just makes no sense as a question. It's all context dependent. And I would just say, like, for example, in Uruguay, we have tons of land and not a lot of people. A lot of the land is just rolling hills. And so why would we take that land and till a lot of it up and tilling agriculture to make annual agriculture plants when we have the space to integrate livestock? Now, there are different schools of thought on this, but like throughout a lot of human history, when people had small holdings, they had like a diverse stacked agriculture. So it wasn't like just livestock roaming. It would be like livestock that moved around in between planted fruit trees and some annual ag that then, you're moving the nutrients in between the compost and the and there's planned burns and all of this kind of thing. So to me, I'm open to and supportive of a diverse diet, a diverse agriculture, place specific, culture specific. And to me, my main frustration with the agriculture debate is the global diet, like as if there should be a global diet. And that goes into a whole other perspective I have about like how data is used, et cetera. But like basically the top down, let's have a global conference and a global diet is just the absolute incorrect thing. What the local diet should be, I don't know. It'll be dependent, you know, but I would just say, yeah, that's another thing I'm really resistant to.
Yeah, that's very interesting. I mean, that is and you know, this would be a bit of a tangent we could go on down, but it does seem like there's a lot of research, anthropological research on diet, obviously, that shows that at the level of the microbiome, that people are adapted to their local environments. And so the question then is, you know, how can we cultivate really um, a healthy and diverse microbiome through our relationship to our local environment, and
Totally.
that should be the message. You know, here I am telling everybody how to do things, but it just feels like that should be the approach that, you know, when we're talking about global diets, it should be, you know, diverse. It should be focused on diversity there, because that just, you know, there's a lot of research that shows that that's how our immune systems are going to be healthier too. So that makes a lot of sense to me. Um, I wanted to kind of come back around because we only have about 15 minutes left. So I wanted to come back around to the uh, the Rhizome Field School, um, and start with just um, a little bit of a story on your part of how it took shape. You landed in Uruguay. Then what happened? How did
Mhm.
the field school take shape? What, you know, what were the challenges, and what were the
Mm.
successes, and returning back to where you are now. And then I just have another question related to the vision for the field school. So yeah, we can just take that ball and run with it if you wish.
Yeah, yeah, sure. So we first got here, and you know, I'm still in the middle of my PhD program, still kind of revising my dissertation, but you know, I was free from done with classes and just kind of on my own to finish that. When we moved here, we had a 5-month-old and a 3-year-old. So just kind of, we had bought a plot of land, but it had no home on it. So when we came here, we were just renting a place and just trying to find a builder who would build us like a home as quickly as possible, as cheaply as possible, so we could just get out of our rental and get onto the land. But in the midst of that process, basically like just, you know, stop my head spinning. Where do I buy food? Where do I buy things? How do I get, you know, make sure I can take care of my kids in the new culture, new country? You know, in between that, I was just thinking, you know, okay, soon I'll have my PhD. How do I use that to like advance our larger goals here, which are not only to just have self-sufficiency, or, you know, not have self-sufficiency, move toward more self-sufficiency with our family, but also to share what I'm learning with others. And so I just thought, you know, we've got to be able to start some kind of study abroad type thing. You know, I've worked in higher ed in the United States. I'm super comfortable working with undergraduates in the US, but now we're here. We have a connection to this place, and I could be a sort of what we called in qualitative research a key informant, somebody who knows both worlds and can explain one to the other and back and forth, that kind of thing. So I just sort of started telling people in my circles about this idea and what might I do. And I made a connection with somebody at the University of Idaho who runs their alternative service break program. And that program is basically, it's not a credit bearing program. It's like, you know, alternative spring break, but they do them for all the breaks. So people go and do some service instead of, you know, going to Cancun or whatever. And so and all of the students pay a fee so that some of the students have a subsidized trip. And so they do local trips around the US, and then they do over winter break international trips. And so I started working with this woman, Natalie, there to develop our program and how we might be an alternative winter break program for them. And that was 2018. And we hosted the student groups. That student group came and we basically, tried to understand, okay, what are students looking for out of this experience? And then what do we have here? And basically we came to realize, like, almost stumbled into this pedagogical practice of like, let's just bring people to our friends, and we're part of this community, so we like know everybody. And so we're bringing them to our friends who are small scale producers, have family farms or self-producing. And basically we ask our friends, what do you need help with? What can you use 14 volunteers for something? And they're like, yeah. So they develop projects that are developed by them, not by us, which I think is really important. The work they want to have done that would be helpful to them. Then we bring the students, and the students come and, do the work. And then in the evening, basically I come to the students' reflections and they share what they are seeing. And then I help just spin each of their reflections to a sociological or environmental lens. Like, what are you seeing? Why is this important? How do you bring it to your own life? And yeah, it's been like a really wonderful model for education, experiential learning. And really there's nothing like seeing something in person, but it's focused on the practical too. And then you can put the practical in context, and that kind of thing. And then the cross-cultural conversations are always really lovely too.
Oh, I bet they're amazing. Yeah. One of the things I noticed on your website that I want to get your take on is that, what you're talking about right there is a wonderful opportunity for students to really immerse themselves in the possibilities of regenerative agriculture, and I guess regenerative communities, and
Yeah.
community building, which, I mean, I am so excited about, because we desperately need that. I mean, going back to something we just talked about earlier, is really what I heard in what you were saying is that the hyper individualism that's kind of taken over the interactions that we have as a, now I would almost say so-called society, end up disconnecting us from each other and from our natural environment and from our food and from everything that matters, everything that's ever mattered.
Right.
And so, what I hear in the vision that you're sharing is that, at least one of the solutions that's going to have to take shape, and that is taking shape through your work and the work of others, in the face of climate change and in the face of, just catastrophic biodiversity loss and other kinds of impacts, holds out some, dare I use the word, hope for humans, or at least certain human communities, and as that kind of rolls out. And so because it reconnects us, because it gives us a sense of meaning that arises from the action, the collaborative, cooperative action that we involve ourselves in the act of staying alive together, and learning how to do that. So that's really cool. What I see is on your website was a really interesting kind of radical take on that, and I just wanted your comments on this quote. So on the website it says that the purpose of the school is to hack, subvert, create, resist, and share strategies across contexts. So maybe you could speak to that a little bit.
Yeah, I think another professor at Appalachian State, his name's Jason Snyder. He's another guy on Twitter who we kind of co-created Doomer Optimism. He calls this strategy cosmolocalism, cosmopolitan localism. Basically, the idea being, we can come up with our little strategies in real life and local contexts, and then we can share what we find, with other people. And the strategies in, I don't know, what, I've never said this either out loud, but I'm thinking back to this this magazine I used to read regularly when I had time to read things, called Adbusters, and really cool magazine out of Canada. And they were the ones who I think sort of more or less planted the seed for Occupy Wall Street, with a lot of their memes and a lot of, I think they were the first ones to use the the phrase, and then it just sort of went crazy. But they constantly were sharing like different things that people could do. For example, in one of their pages of their magazine, they had a like kick down economy or no kick down economics manifesto or something like that that you could rip out of the paper of the magazine, copy it, and go to your local economics department and just put it on the door of all the professors and just say like, this the way you're doing economics is destroying the world, basically. That kind of thing, which like I love the idea that we are such creative species. Like we are so able to come up with solutions, and it doesn't have to be like something as political or ideologically as that. It could be like, we have a solar water heater. I can just show people our solar water heater and say like, look, this is working for us. Here's how it works. This is what we do. And then, it could light a spark in, 5 other people to have, to get one and to have that work for them. So when I say like hack, subvert, create, resist, there's so many ways to be creative, and then to share those, whatever's working for you with others, and then hopefully maybe it works for them, maybe it doesn't. But I think like, yeah, the rhizome is what's an intentionally chosen metaphor. It's like a root structure that moves laterally. It's very hard to eradicate, and it's not hierarchical. It's like, it's just, we're just little nodes connecting and sharing resources, sort of laterally with one another.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, I love the term rhizome too, and there's so much new work coming out in forest science and everything that shows how there's an intelligence to that too, that
Yeah.
emerges as things interconnect. And wow, if that isn't the best metaphor for where we need to head, I can't think of one.
I know.
So you really nailed it on that one. Thank you. So I guess to wrap it up, I want to just bring it full circle to the opportunities that the Rhizome Field School offers right now to maybe to undergraduate students, because some of my students or some of my university students and beyond might be interested to know more about that. And then maybe other opportunities. I know that you're doing that online mentoring or course coaching kind of thing related to homesteading.
Yep.
So I guess, yeah, I would just like to hear what kind of opportunities are emerging for others to take advantage of based on what you're doing over there.
Yep. So okay, the first one that's like comes to mind is I would love to host a remote intern or two. If any of your students were interested and had the opportunity to get credit in return for internship work. But I'm building a sort of separate but completely in line with everything else I'm doing. Project is called Loconomy, and I'm basically building out a map of local businesses. And it's just the most basic, map, Google map, but it is meant to be a repository for local businesses. And I have a whole bunch of work that I do not have time to do of getting more of those businesses onto that map, and I've literally heard from people that they are buying things off of this map. They're connecting with others because of this map, which I'm like, this is so amazing, but I don't have time to keep adding to this spreadsheet that feeds into the map. That's one thing. I'm always open to hosting more student groups. We have only one that's recurring at the moment. But that is at the level of like, you and I or somebody who works at the university or working with it at the administration to make that happen for students, basically. And then we, go through all the red tape because every American university is just a lot of that, but it's to be expected. But so I'm open to that. You or your colleagues or anyone who might want to bring a student group here, we can do credit bearing programs. We can do, volunteer abroad programs, that kind of thing. And then, so then I'm doing this online Homestead Incubator class, and that I will be talking about on the STOA in December. But the short of it is that basically I see like a whole bunch of people out there who are experienced homesteaders, like 15 plus years, and then a whole bunch of people who are like brand new to small scale food production. And I just decided to put them together. I just said, I'm going to get all these people I know who are extremely capable homesteaders to mentor in a classroom setting people who want to get onto some land. And so that will run in January. It'll be like my first, it's just like a new venture, a new, mini educational institution. But I think the idea being, people really need some practical hands-on skills. They need to wrap their heads around like what is involved. A lot of the homestead mentors have said, like, I can't wait to tell people all the mistakes they can avoid by listening to my advice, which I'm really like, I think is really beautiful, because they're like the early adopters who can help the next, reach a hand back. But then my not so secret goal is to build a network and community of people who because they took the class together, build friendships, and are these kind of, I have a couple of people like that here in Uruguay, like we're on the same homesteading journey. So we can, reach out to each other, share successes and failures. And then what happens is like little bits of innovation come from that. I have a friend here in Uruguay who's, what do you do with your water system? What have you been doing with your chickens? And then we share, strategies and kind of co-learn. So yeah, those are all the things I'm up to at the moment.
That's so cool. And it sounds like that's going to open up into other new opportunities too. It just sounds like a very fertile ground, no pun intended, for for generating this kind of thing. And I could imagine a whole separate conversation we could have or might have in the future around and we didn't touch on this, but around the role of or your vision for decentralized communities, but that it strikes me that they're not just decentralized, but they're also interconnected. So that's very interesting, like rhizomes. So that's what I'm hearing, what you're saying, that maybe the future really needs to have that kind of model of human society built into it, rather than this very hierarchical, very centralized model. We have one that's full of decentralized communities sharing with each other to promote each other's continued
and I would just say,
innovation.
and like,
yeah, please.
Totally. And I would just say, like, even though I'm like a Luddite, meaning low technology in general, I think why not use the power of the internet to like start sharing resources with each other? It exists until it doesn't. So let's just use it. Let's share our knowledge and information and, whatever.
It exists until it doesn't. I love that. That's great. Well, I want to be mindful of your time, Ashley, and I want to thank you so much for taking so much of it to share your vision and your work with us. And I'm super excited to share this with my students. With your permission, would I be able to share it with others beyond the class?
Yeah, I would love that. Yeah, I mean, honestly,
Okay.
if you put it up on YouTube, I'd be happy to share it
Okay,
publicly.
fantastic.
Yeah, it was a great conversation, and so
It
I had some
sure
public
was.
insights I hadn't had before.
Oh, fantastic. That's the benefit of
Yeah.
conversation, isn't it? All right. Well, thank you so
Yeah,
much.
totally.
And
Absolutely.
I'll be back in touch. And yeah, I wish you a great rest of your day, and wish your family all the best, and everything you're doing is so important. So I wish you all success in that area too. Thank you, Ashley.
Thanks, Mike. All right, we'll be in touch. Talk to you soon.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.